Hey Creagears, Roboy here and welcome back to a brand new video. Despite the amazing launch of Splatoon 3, we still have one more Splatoon 2 project we had to finish. Because in this video we will show you guys how we finished this Kensa Octobrush commission. After our planning phase where we had to plan out the project, we could first start with a PVC frame for the handle. Using 32mm PVC and a few different couplers, we were able to make this sturdy base for the brush. Most of these are just straight pieces, but for one part of the brush I needed to heat up a PVC pipe to make two curves into the tube. Shamefully, these 30-degree angles would not have been feasible with at least the possible couplers at our disposal. But at least it does give us a nice natural curve to the PVC pipe. Next up we used a bit of foam board to make the circle that is placed on top of the handle. Using two circles of 150mm and two circles of 90mm, with a 15mm edge glued around the bigger circles, we can create the depth needed for this part of the weapon. After this, we continued with the foam board by making a wrap that will be the base of the bristles for the Octobrush. Making a 380 by 90 by 40mm box with the top side still open for the bristles to be inserted. Of course, giving all of the touching edges a 45-degree angle to make a nice flush edge. But this does serve the purpose of making the rounded edges that the wrap also has in game. With the wrap done, it is now the perfect time to make those bristles. We could make these by using thousands of little strands like a real brush would have, but for the sake of ever uploading this video, we chose to make the bristles of the brush from 5mm EVA foam. By first making the sides to get the shape of the brush figured out. After that, I first draw out the width that the brush needs to have on the foam. After which I used the sides to check that the circumference of the middle would actually meet up with the sides. And so, after adjusting for this parameter, I was able to cut out the two parts of this huge EVA foam piece. This means that now I had to glue the parts of the middle together, and after that it was time for the sides to be attached. But instead of gluing the edge of one of these to the side of the other, I used our heat gun to bend the middle to line up both of the edges to glue the two to each other. This way we get a lot more natural curve than we would ever get by just sanding back the edge. And it also leaves a lot more material for a sturdier brush. But no Octobrush is complete without its signature load of ink at the tip of the bristles. But we will leave the production of that for a later part. Now we can just mark it out where we want the ink to be. Because first we need to focus on the guards of the brush, for the basis of which we could use some more foam board. Cutting both the bottom and the top out of a full sheet of foam board. And afterwards bending both using the edge of our table. Luckily the top one was very easy to finish, using some contact cement to glue some more 5mm EVA foam to both the top and the bottom of the foam board to hide the wrinkles that come with bending the material. And to give it a bit more of a fitting thickness to match the rest of the prop. Making sure to mark the pieces of foam with the curve in mind, since more material would be required for the outside edge than the inside edge. For this one we needed to bend another piece of PVC pipe to give it a rise of 120mm. Or to more so explain that, from the bottom of the PVC pipe to the top of the curve we have a difference of 120mm. And to this we could then glue both the outside version of the brace with some 32mm spaces in between, to give more support together with the PVC pipe. After which we glue on the inside curve. Then all we had to do was glue on the sides with a little bit more foam board. And again using this masking tape patterning trick that we also used on the curved stairs of the Samurai diorama and the Octobot King 2 to get the shape of these specific curved edges. Next up was the ink tank for the brush. For this part of the prop we started with an egg pattern that we had made for the arms of the Octobot King 2 and edited it to be the size of the brush. So now we had to trace and cut out the 4 pieces and start to attach them. Although for the first part I only glued them into 2 halves. Since before we could continue, I first needed to add a piece of foam board to the inside of the tank as the ink level. This had to be done now, since the opening of the tank would not have been big enough to be able to add it later. So after that was added, I could add some contact cement to the edges of the EVA foam and add hot glue to the foam board to attach the 2 halves. Which gives us this nice little egg. Onto which we can now draw the real opening of the ink tank and cut this out. But once I had corrected that mistake, I could add some more contact cement to this edge piece. Which I could then glue to the perimeter of the opening. And to get the Octo into Octobrush, I could now add these octopus eyes to the tank, made from some 30mm XPS foam. But then we needed to do some work on how we're going to attach it all. The only 2 parts where the front and the back are connected are the bottom brace, where we already have this nice PVC pipe connection, and this little tube from the ink tank. So for this we made this MDF insert. Afterwards we could then add this aluminium pipe. Even so, this is not just a straight path. Even after figuring out the 45-degree angle which I needed to bend the pipe to connect from the MDF insert in the PVC pipe handle to the MDF brace within the wrap, I still had to edit the bend because it could not fit within the tank as long as we had that foam board ink level. So for this I had marked out the beginning and the end of the pipe on a sheet of paper and started to lower the bend to allow both it and the tank to be added to the brush. And so with that, and a little addition of a larger pipe to be able to take it apart, I get to press and glue it on and get it ready to glue on all of the parts permanently. So first up we're supergluing the aluminium pipe to the MDF insert. On top of which we could then hot glue the ink tank. And finally, at the end of the tank, I used some more superglue to bond the tank to the coupler of the aluminium pipe. Lastly, we get to glue the bristles permanently to the wrap to make it into one solid piece. Together with this aluminium pipe. And so after all of that building, we get to this phase of the Octobrush. This first gives us then the task to go and glue on a wrap of 5mm EVA foam around the PVC handle to hide all of the PVC couplers that were used and to give us a better material to add the wood grain texture to in just a little bit. Using contact cement and a 130mm wide strip of foam to go and wrap around the PVC. After which we had to do just a little bit more wrapping, but this time it was for the raised ink portion at the tips of the bristles. For this I started with a flat sheet of 2mm EVA foam, which I had glued to the top and the bottom of the bristles. After which I had snipped the sides to shape and also glued these to the bristles permanently. Then it was just a matter of marking out the rest of the ink, making another masking tape pattern, tracing this onto another piece of 2mm EVA foam, and gluing this very carefully to the matching edge of the rest of the raised ink. Then, while the glue on the ink dried, I could add the tentacles and the circle to the handle. After which I then also glued the tentacles to this circle, since in-game they seem to grab onto this part of the brush. So with my heat gun in tow, I bent these 20mm foam dowel tentacles in shape, and with some contact cement I attached them all to the touching points. Finally, I could use the Dremel to clean up the edges of the opening. And by angling my sanding drum a bit, I can add the wood grain texture to the handle. the top guard, not forgetting about the individual bristles at the front of the brush. Even onto the foam board of the lower guards. This also hides some of the more visible creases of the foam board within the rest of the grain.
Sure.
Next up, a new material for our channel, foam clay. A very sticky substance that can be applied to many types of materials and once dried, works just like foam. Luckily, with very wet gloves, this stuff doesn't stick too much, but at least it's very handy for making the dripping ink on the sides of the ink tank. Not only that, but it can also be used as a kind of filler for the tentacles and where the wrapping filled a bit around the PVC pipes and on the brush. And lastly, we get the red Kensa clamp that all of the weapons in this series have. For this commission, I had chosen to make a 3D printed version of the clamp to make production just a little bit easier on ourselves. But if you also want to make one, you could just as easily use materials like XPS foam or MDF to make this clamp. Even so, the files of the clamp will be included in the reference material map, so you can use that as a reference, or if you also have a 3D printer, you can just as easily put it through your slicer and also print it. And so, with all of the support material removed, I could start on the painting of the prop. We first started with a black primer of acrylic paint and Mod Podge, since the grinding of the wood grain and some of the building techniques still left a few open foam edges, and especially the octo eyes that we don't want to melt with spray painting. After which we could start to add some of the first colors to the pieces. Like this red coat to the clip to be able to finish it off with some white acrylic paint on the Kensa logo. And to complete this clip while we're still at it, I bended this 8mm aluminium tube into a circle and divided it into 3 parts that made it possible to superglue each piece on the inside of the opening in the clip while hiding all of the seams to still get the impression that it's one piece. And with a black base added to both of the guards, we could start to add the first of the masking. For these pieces, to be able to add the white gradient that moves back from the front of the weapon. But we also had to do some masking around the inside of the ink tank to be able to safely add the white and then the pink of the ink. Or the pink that we need to protect on the bristles from this desaturated brown. Even if we have to do a little bit more black cleanup on the wrap. With most of these main colors done, we could then go and add some of the finer details. Like this Tony Kensa logo for the top guard, which we first need to cut out. After which we then had to brush it on with some white acrylic paint. Or the chance to add these light brown details to the engraved part of the bristles. Man, it was a long and boring part of the project. But with that added, I can finally glue the pieces of the guards and the bristles together. Making sure that while we're gluing, all of the pieces are connected to the handle to make sure we have them in the right place. Would have been a shame if it all didn't line up anymore. Then to round out the project, we get to add these 20mm white strips around the newly glued braces. One on the bottom of the logo and one around the top of the logo. And lastly, I add some gloss spray paint to the pink inks around the brush and some gloss varnish to the ink on the sides of the tank. With that, we can officially announce the Kensa Octobrush Replica finished. Hey Creagears, Roboy here, and we hope you enjoyed this replica project. It seems like the time has finally come. Splatoon 3 has officially been released. So you guys can expect a lot of Splatoon related projects coming to this channel from this point onwards. And if you guys are interested, we can also do some live streams now of Splatoon 3. But we do want to hear first from you guys, if you are interested in seeing that. So leave your answers down in the comments, and then we will read them. But that's going to be all from us for now. Keep those creative gears turning, and we will see you guys in the next video.